So welcome to the presentation for Ascelia Pharma. I'm very happy to be here and to share what our company is doing. I'll be making some forward-looking statements. So this is, you could say, the overview, the one-pager on Ascelia Pharma. So we are a drug development company based in Malmö in Sweden, and we develop new medicines for the treatment of cancer in rare indications, in orphan indications, meaning it's small, on a global scale, patient populations where there's no good, effective medicine for their needs today. We did an IPO on Nasdaq in Stockholm in March this year. So now we have the full financing to go through the phase 3 program and obtain and file for registration of Mangoral, our lead clinical program. So we have, as of June 30, we had 225 million Swedish kronor in the bank. So the lead program here, Mangoral, it's a novel imaging drug, kontrastmedel in Swedish. So it's something that the patient will drink before going into the MRI scanner. It will then enhance the liver, and the doctors will be much better able to assess whether cancer has spread to the liver. I'll come back to that in a lot more detail. We have orphan drug designation giving us special market exclusivity and special access to the FDA. And the reason for that is that these patients have nothing today, and there's nothing heading in development in the same path as our product. So we will be alone on that market. We have completed 6 clinical trials to date. We have agreed with the FDA and the EMA on the phase 3 program, which we will start enrolling patients into this year. The other program we have is Oncoral. Oncoral is a chemotherapeutic drug, cellgift. That product is available today, used in patients today as an infusion. So patients will go to the hospital, get an IV line, get a massive dose all at once, and very significant side effects. It's effective for treating the cancer, but the side effects are very significant. What we have done is we have patented a new formulation that the patient can take as a tablet at home. So instead of giving this massive dose all at once, patients can take tablets at home every day and get an adequate dose so that the molecules will attack the cancer and kill the cancer cells, but not so much drug every day that it's significant side effects. So that is our pipeline. We're very excited about that. So recently, we have a skewed fiscal year. So from the last quarter, we had some very significant milestones. We had a meeting with the European Medicinal Agency, EMA, about the phase 3 design that we had already discussed with the American authorities. We then had the meeting with the Europeans, and we wanted to get them to agree. And the good news is that we managed to do that. The other point is that for the Oncoral, the tablet, chemo tablet, we published data from our phase 1b study, which showed that when given together with another chemo tablet, different type, we got very good safety, which was the key objective of this. We filed a patent application for a next generation version of the Mangoral product. So we have the first generation, and we will do a second generation product to maximize the value of our invention of Mangoral. If this patent is granted, we will have patent protection until 2040. And then we raised from the green shoe. It's a little technical, we had an over-allotment, which is customary on the Nasdaq transactions, and we issued another 22 million of cash. So looking just very briefly about how far has Mangoral come in novel drug development. Right now we are phase 3 ready, meaning that we are just about to go into phase 3. And we will later this year enroll the first patient in the trial. At the end of next year, we expect to have the last patient in the trial, so this is a relatively rapid study. And then we will have the final results shortly thereafter, because the evaluation will be looking at the images. When they've scanned the patient, looked at the liver, then they will compare the images. So this is very rapid. In 2021, we will finalize the study report, we will file for approval, we will gear up on launch activities, and then in 2022, we will start generating revenue from Mangoral. Briefly on the team, we are a very experienced team, both in the management with a lot of drug development experience and also in the board, drug development, commercialization, global commercialization experience. So, going to Mangoral, go into more depth. So what does Mangoral do? So what you see here is a liver. It's actually from an autopsy, you can see a lot of very large metastasis in this liver. You don't want it to go this far. The problem is that the liver is a very frequent organ for metastasis, meaning that cancer starts in one organ in the body and then spreads to another organ. Actually, the liver is the most frequent site of metastasis after lymph nodes. That's why this is a very common problem in cancer treatment. 70% of patients with colon cancer, tarmkræft, will have metastasis in the liver. And very often, the patient will not die from the primary tumor, the breast or the colon. They will die from the metastasis in the liver. So that is a major issue in cancer treatment. So how is that being dealt with today? So to be able to treat liver metastasis, cancer spreading to the liver, you need to see it. You need to know that it's there. And the way to do that is through medical imaging. So the patient will go into a scanner, as you can see here. And the best way to look for liver metastasis is an MRI procedure, magnetkameraundersökning in Swedish. And to maximize the accuracy of that procedure, the patient will be injected into the bloodstream with a imaging drug, contrast agent, based on a toxic heavy metal called gadolinium. So gadolinium is very good in enhancing the signal when they do the scan. But unfortunately, it's a toxic heavy metal, but that is what is available today. So that is what is being used today. When the radiologists have made the images of the liver, he will then confer with the oncologist, the cancer doctor, and the surgeon. They will look at the images, they will look at the patient health status and all the available information, and they will decide how can we best help this patient. So if they can do surgery, so cut away the tumors in the liver, that is the preferred option. Sometimes that is not possible. Maybe there are too many, maybe they are located next to very large blood vessels, and then surgery is not an option. Then they could do localized therapies, where they can, you could say, radiate or burn or fry the tumors, or they can have drug therapy, which is in essence the majority, or a combination of these. So that is based on the information from the images. And why does that matter? Well, it matters a lot because this is one study, and many other studies have shown similar, that if metastases in the liver are detected early and removed by surgery, survival for the patient can be dramatically improved. In this study, 5 years after treatment, 6% were alive that got only drug treatment. Of those that got surgery first, then drug treatment, 46% were alive. And there are many other studies like this. And that is why when they do the images, if they can do surgery, they want to do surgery as soon as possible. And how can they do surgery? Early detection, very efficient imaging procedure. MRI with a gadolinium agent. So the problem is that, as I mentioned, gadolinium is a toxic heavy metal. And in patients with poorly functioning kidneys, that can be toxic. It can be devastating. They get something called nephrogenic systemic fibrosis, a potentially deadly condition with no treatment. And as a consequence, the authorities have put in place black box warning, requesting doctors to screen patients for poorly functioning kidney, dårlig njurfunktion. And this is a major issue in clinical practice. And the problem is that there is no non-gadolinium product on the market today for these patients. And this is where Mangoral comes in. We've tried to sort of illustrate this. So today, patients with normal kidney function, near normal kidney function, they get a gadolinium enhanced drug. The ones that have very poor kidney function, they get an MRI procedure with no imaging enhancing drug. So going forward, this is exactly where we will position Mangoral in the clinical treatment of patients. The ones that have nothing today will get Mangoral. This is 280,000 patients, US, Europe, and Japan. This is a quite significant patient population. From the perspective of Ascelia, not necessarily if you're Pfizer, but this is a very significant market opportunity. So what is Mangoral? Mangoral is oral administrated, so it's a powder that we mix with water. The patient will drink it, and it's based on manganese, which is a natural trace element. We all have manganese in our bodies in small amounts. It's also part of nutrition. It's in pineapples in small amounts, in blueberries, etc. So it's an element that is not foreign to the body. Big advantage. It also is very effective for enhancing the quality of the liver scan. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And because it's not gadolinium, there's no risk of nephrogenic systemic fibrosis, which are exactly the patients we're looking for. We have very good data. I'll come back to that, but it's a very attractive, and in our clinical studies, we've done 6 clinical studies, patients and doctors have been very happy to use the product. It's much more convenient for the patient to do rather than getting an intravenous injection of gadolinium. So the next here is a picture from one of our clinical trials. This is a real patient going through an MRI procedure, lying on the back, feet towards you. And what you can see here to the left is the liver. So the radiologist will have a stack of slices, and the black dots you can see are bile ducts, gallgångar, and blood vessels. So this is the standard of care for an unenhanced liver MRI. Then this patient had Mangoral, and you can see all the healthy liver cells light up. That's because healthy liver cells take up manganese. Metastases are not liver cells, they cannot take up the manganese. And in this case, there was a clear metastasis here that was completely missed. And this is not just because of the light on the stage, this is on the images. So going back to the previous, one of the first slides I shared with you, if liver metastases are present in the patient, the most important thing is to do surgery as soon as possible. With the current standard of care, which is this, the metastasis would have been missed and the disease would have progressed. Here, with the information from Mangoral, this could be a candidate for surgery and a very much better outcome for the patient. That's the value Mangoral provides to the patient. Better treatment decision, better outcomes. So as mentioned, we have very strong clinical results, 6 clinical trials completed. We've also done what we call a blind read study. So we've taken all the images that we have in all the studies, put them together. We had Professor Rendo Nilsson from Duke University, top-tier radiologist, review all the images. He saw 33% more black dots that were abnormal tissue. That's a major improvement. When we looked at some other parameters on lesion visualization, it's called conspicuity, which is essentially, is it more bright? Or delineation, how sharp the edges are, which is very useful when they measure disease progression, whether the black dots, the tumor is growing or not, is the medicine working or not. We saw very significant p-values. So these results gave us a very solid foundation for designing the phase 3 program. And we went with these data, including the primary data from the studies, to the FDA and the EMA and said, our drug works. This is how we're going to prove it in the phase 3 program. And we have agreement with the FDA on the phase 3 program. And this is what it's going to look like. I think the font is a little light here, but I hope you can read it. So essentially, we will do a global registration-enabling phase 3 study in 200 patients, approximately 30 hospitals around the world, US, Europe, and South Korea, where we've chosen some of the most prestigious hospitals to participate. The primary endpoint will be lesion visualization, which is how can they visualize more lesions. And these are the endpoints that we have proven in our previous studies that Mangoral was highly successful in achieving. Meaning that we're not measuring something new in the phase 3 trial. We're doing the same as we've done in the previous studies. We're very successful at in the previous studies. We're just repeating that in a global study. The other point is that we will compare with unenhanced. So first the patient will have a scan without any imaging drug. They will then drink Mangoral and have a new Mangoral scan. And we will compare the combined information from these two with the standard of care. And we need to prove that we're better. And that's because there's nothing available for these patients. This is a very significant advantage in the design and should hopefully lead to no surprises in the study. So this was the trial design. We've been looking a lot into the market because it's always a challenge to be a pioneer. Nobody have developed a product for this patient population. So we've been doing a lot and investing a lot of time and resources into evaluating how many patients out there, how can we access them, how can we make sure that they are given Mangoral once it's out there. And we have very positive results from that. There are 280,000 patients in Europe, US, and Japan. We also know that the way Mangoral works, it's useful not only for single use in a patient, but it's for initial diagnosis, monitoring response to treatment. So when patients are given drugs, if the tumor is growing, the drugs are not working, they should change to some other drugs. And so that will be several scans per patient. Sorry. And then, obviously, we've been looking a lot into pricing. We have spoken with more than 25 payers, so health insurance companies, both public ones, especially in Europe, but also private ones, and especially in the US. Based on those discussions, we think price $1,500 to $3,000 per dose is cost effective for the healthcare system. By having better scans in these very expensive to treat patients, they can better use the healthcare dollars and make them more effective treatment, better outcome for patient, and overall budget is smaller. So that's a $350 to $500 million market for Mangoral. And as I said, nothing is approved for these patients, nothing in development, in clinical development here for the liver. So we've been looking very briefly here into commercialization. We are evaluating whether we should build our own sales force. 10, 20 sales rep would be sufficient to penetrate the majority of the US market. That will be, if that is the case, it will be extremely profitable for us. We will look for partners in other geographies, in particular in Asia. One final comment here on Mangoral is that we're focusing on the patients with very poor kidney function. They are the ones with the black box warning, screening procedures in clinic. That's well established that is an issue. Another issue has come up in the last couple of years, which is even patients with perfectly healthy kidneys, when they are injected with the gadolinium goes into the bloodstream and circulates in the body. Small amount of this dose of gadolinium will accumulate in the brain. Gadolinium is a toxic heavy metal, so that is not a good thing. But nobody really knows today what the consequence is. The FDA, the EMA has requested manufacturers to do a lot of research. Academic groups are doing a lot of research, and a lot of data will come out. So we will see what comes out of that. But this has created a lot of concern. It's in the media. I think 1 or 2 weeks ago there was a big article in Der Spiegel in Germany about patient getting a lot of side effects from gadolinium. We will follow that. That's not part of our core strategy. But obviously, if we are the only non-gadolinium product on the market, and gadolinium turns out to be more toxic than anticipated today, that could be a tremendous opportunity. So that's just wanted to share that news. So briefly, and I'm running a little out of time here, but Oncoral, as mentioned, that's a tablet formulation. Instead of going to the hospital, sitting for an hour and a half, getting infusion and getting a massive dose of cell gift, the patient can take tablets at home. This is very obviously convenient, but we think there are some significant safety benefits. So the injectable drug is available. Camtosar and Onivyde are available for colorectal and pancreatic cancer. We're developing Oncoral for the treatment of gastric cancer, stomach cancer. And that's because that is a very severe form of cancer, very deadly. It's also an orphan condition, and if you think back about one of the first slides, we're focusing on orphan, you could say small, global cancer indications. We also know that the injectable form of irinotecan, this molecule, is approved for gastric cancer in Japan, but not in Europe and not in US. What does that tell us? It tells us that the molecule, once it gets into the body, is effective in treating the cancer, gastric cancer. That's important information. And we also know that the oncologists, the doctors treating cancer, especially gastric cancer, are very excited about this program. So we have presented these data both at ESMO, the major cancer conference in Europe, and also in 2 publications showing that when patients take the Oncoral tablet, it goes into the stomach, into the small intestine, and then goes into the bloodstream. So when we measure the blood levels of irinotecan and its metabolites, it goes into the patient as it should, has a good distribution, and the safety profile is very good. Same type of side effects as the one that goes in through injection, but much milder. So these data were very good, and as you know, briefly, gastric cancer is more than a $4 billion market opportunity, rapidly growing. You know, more patients get gastric cancer, unfortunately. So there's a significant need for new and better treatments, including a product such as Oncoral. Briefly looking ahead, we will have very busy times ahead of us. As mentioned, very important getting the first patient into the trial later this year, and then in a year from now, we will have the final results. Based on that information, we will file the approval for FDA and EMA. As mentioned initially, we did the IPO on NASDAQ in March this year, which tells us that we have the financing to go all the way through the clinical trial and file for approval. So we are in a good financial position. So briefly, Ascelia Pharma, an orphan oncology company, developing novel drugs for the treatment of rare cancer indications, fully financed for the phase 3 program of Mangoral, a unique product targeting a $350 to $500 million market with no competition, and Oncoral ready for moving into phase 2 for the treatment of gastric cancer. Thank you.
Magnus, welcome over here.
Yep.
Shall we do this in English or in Swedish?
You can ask in Swedish. I'll answer in English. That probably
okay.
My Swedish is not good enough for.
Okay. Okay. Så en fråga då när det gäller de här magnetkamerautrustningen som klinikerna har.
Yeah.
De använder dem för gadolinium idag.
Yeah.
Behöver de ändra sensorer eller någonting?
Nej. It's a good question. No, so it's a very good question. So today when they're using gadolinium, they have, you know, the expertise. That's the daily bread and butter business for them. When they use Mangoral, they do the same machine, basically the same, you would say, settings on the machines. And when they read the images, that is comparable to what some of the liver-specific gadolinium products can do. So they are not only are the machines ready to use Mangoral, but the radiologists they've also been trained to evaluate the images in a way that is consistent with the gadolinium images. Okay, so you said basically, so there are no extra costs for the clinic to use your product compared to gadolinium. Exactly. So from a workflow perspective, it's actually even better. Okay. Because when a patient goes in for an MRI procedure, they will have an IV line, and then they will need to time it, and then we'll inject it. So typically what we hear from radiology clinics is that a liver MRI with gadolinium is typically 30 to 50 minutes. In one of our clinical trials, actually done here at Karolinska, they measured with Mangoral, it was 10 minutes. Okay. So you can imagine the efficiency that they can have by using much less time on getting the required information. Okay. So when a patient have an MR with gadolinium, the clinic has full control. They inject the gadolinium, and the patients are there sitting for any adverse reactions on the drug. Yeah. In your case, the patient would take the drug or the substance at home. Not in the clinical studies. So no, but in the commercial phase, because you say 2 to 6 hours before. Yeah. So what happens with the control of the clinic? Will they be concerned that the patient wasn't compliant, or will there be any problem there? So yeah, it's a good question. So in the clinical study, they will drink it. The patient will drink it at their clinic to make absolutely certain that everything goes right. What could potentially be something down the road would be that we convince the FDA and the EMA that the patient can drink it at home. And then, as you mentioned, it will stay in the liver for at least 4 hours. So they could drink it at home, go to the hospital, go in very quickly, have the scan, and then leave. That would be super efficient for patient and for the healthcare system. So that's obviously something we're thinking about down the road, but that requires, you could say, another level of regulatory approval. We need to show the data to the authorities that this is perfectly doable.
Yeah.
And some patients would be able to take this at home, no problem. Some other patients, more sick patients, may want to prefer to go to the hospital and wait for a few hours.
Yeah. No, I don't think the clinics would like to have patients sitting for 6 hours just waiting, and the patients would like to work, whatever. Yeah. I'm a little bit concerned about a small company. I mean, you're a fairly small company compared to the big guys. You have two different types of products. You have one for scanning.
Yeah.
It's more like a device type of compound. And then you have a treatment.
Yeah.
How can one organization focus on two different customers, actually? Because one is the radiologist and the other is the oncology treating doctor. And also on the development side, there must be a difference in there. So how can you keep with two different business ideas, actually?
You know, I think we do a pretty good job, but obviously it's a matter of being focused on each program. Yeah. The Mangoral is an imaging drug, so it's regulated as a drug with drug guidelines. And if you look at the requirements, even if we had two therapeutic cancer drugs, if one was gastric cancer, one was lung cancer, there might be differences in terms of how we design the studies. There would be significant differences. So we have a very experienced team and have been involved in a lot of drug development. I mean, my chief medical officer, Carl Bjartner, was involved in Wilson Therapeutics, where he was chief medical officer, doing a different kind of trial. We have oncology experience. So I mean, we have, I think, definitely the resources and the capacity and knowledge to develop these two programs. Yeah. So what we're really good and very passionate about is, you could say, small, underserved patient populations where the current treatments are not good enough, and where we, as a small company, can have the best product in the world for exactly that global niche. And a global niche in pharma, as you know, is quite significant and can be very dramatic.
We have a question from the audience. Are you looking for an exit in the near future, or how will you grow?
So our plan is to build a sustainable biotech company with global commercial reach, based out of Sweden. So we're making the decisions as if we are here to stay, making the right types of collaborations and partnerships over time. We will find partners to commercialize the product in Asia for sure, but also investigating, is it financially feasible to build our own sales force in the US? If that is the case, then it can be, financially extremely rewarding for the company. So we're making those decisions and building the right company. So if somebody is super attracted to what we're doing and thinking this is a great product, this is something that they would have in their product portfolio, they may reach out to us. But our strategy is not to do this, get the phase 3 data, and then wait for somebody to call us. We have our own plan. We can be financially very successful as a company. And then if somebody wants to give the shareholders additional upside to that, then we will take the discussion from there. But we're not waiting for somebody to call us. That's not the right strategy.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you. Oh.